everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to today's event. We're very excited. We're going to wait for a few minutes and give people an opportunity to come in. We know it's the lunchtime hour, and we will get started in a few minutes. In the meantime, if you want to introduce yourself, your name, your organization, where in the city or state you are watching this from, we would love to learn more about you. And I see people are trickling in. The numbers are getting bigger. Very excited about that. Feel free to introduce yourself, who you're representing, where in the city or state that you are watching this seminar from. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. Welcome, everyone. I see the numbers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Again, just wanted to introduce ourselves in just a couple of minutes, but want to give folks on the call an opportunity to introduce themselves, where you guys are watching us from, whether you are in the city or the state. We are really excited about today's conversation. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Get started in just a few more minutes. It's the lunchtime hour. Oh, I love it. I see so many different organizations. I love it so much. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for spending your lunchtime hour with us. And with that said, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I am Nayela Amaru, and I am the newly appointed VP of Advocacy, Policy, and Government Relations at Women Creating Change. And my role essentially involves spearheading the development and implementation of WCC's advocacy initiatives so that we are positioned as a resource to government partners and women across the city who are really committed to building a more equitable New York. And Women Creating Change, we used to be known as Women's City Club of New York, and our new name reflects our new direction that we are now taking. We were founded over 100 years ago, and we began as a social clubhouse for women interested in becoming civically engaged. And to reflect the changing times in a changing city, we have charted a new path to empower women to advocate for themselves, create change in their communities, and shape the future of New York. We have adopted a new mission to ensure we have a broader reach across New York and are more inclusive as to who we partner with, to help more women develop and strengthen the skills and resources needed to become change agents in their own communities. And as part of our new direction, we are focusing a gendered lens on several key issues, including economic justice, health, reproductive justice, environmental justice, and safety. And these are just a few of the core issues that impact different women in different ways. And through an intersectional lens of research, programming, and advocacy, WCC is positioned to serve as a key resource for elected officials and advocates across the city and state that are wanting to make New York a more fair, just city as well as state. And so the purpose of today's conversation is to explore Governor Hochul's proposal in her State of the State briefing, Impact on Women, and how you and the women in your life can stay informed and actively engage in advocacy actions through a special WCC created tool called the Civic Hub. And leading us in today's conversation is the Interim Director of the Governor's Office of Women's Affairs, Shakira Thames. She will share with us more about her journey into the role, the work of the Women's Affairs Office, and provide insight into how the State of the State comes to fruition, and conclude by answering questions that you can send through the question and answer feature. So without further ado, here is our special guest leading today's briefing, Interim Director of the Office of Women's Affairs, Shakira Thames.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Nayela. I am so grateful and just so honored to be a part of this conversation and being a part of the reimagining of Women Creating Change. So thank you so much for your partnership, and I have only good hopes and good manifestations moving forward. Hi everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Shakira Thames. I do have the honor of serving as the Interim Director for Women's Affairs for the Office of Governor Kathy Hochul. And a little bit about myself is I am based in Albany, New York. I know that Women Creating Change, or WCC, is New York City based. And one great thing about me is I'm not afraid to go to New York City and spend some time with advocates and folks that are very much invested in supporting women and people across the state. I also sit in this position as an Excelsior Service Fellow for the state of New York. And I'm very grateful and blessed to have that opportunity as well, and to service New York State in this way. I will share my screen with you all just so we can get started. And hopefully you all can see the screen. Okay. Again, I just a short time ago, I did, and hopefully you all can see me. I'm sorry, when you're sharing your screen, it's a little bit different. And just a short time ago, I joined the executive chamber in 2023 of last year in October. And I've been learning a great deal from speaking to and hearing from advocates and members of the community. So again, I just want to thank WCC, thank all the members, the board members, and the community that's showing up today for the opportunity to present and to speak to such a broad and diverse audience today. And part of my presentation, just before I begin, I do want to offer a bit of an overview about where I am positioned within the executive office, and think that that's important to express and acknowledge. So one of the several offices within the administration is Constituency Affairs, and the Constituency Affairs team engages and interacts with constituents, addresses their concerns, and make efforts to represent the community's priorities and issues that are most important to them. And currently there are 7 constituency groups that includes women, LGBTQ plus affairs, Jewish affairs, Latino affairs, African American affairs, Italian and Asian affairs. And it is also well acknowledged that these are not the only identities that are represented across the state, but we also do acknowledge that these identities, among others, intersect and vary in experience and culture, which does allow us within the constituency affairs team to work collaboratively and in frequent partnership. And as you can imagine, within women's affairs, and with women making up 51.4% of the state, there are many issues that directly impact and concern women. And there are just issues that women care about that have nothing to do with the quote unquote traditional roles or traditional issues that concern women. And my portfolio includes childcare, domestic violence and sexual assault, pay equity, and reproductive rights, health and justice, in addition to the various other policy topics and areas that I will be touching on in today's presentation. So the reason that we're all here today, state of the state, many people have questions about it. Before I really started in state government, I had questions about it. What is it? How does it happen? And I borrowed the text timeline from the New York State Division of the Budget website, which outlines the budget process. And as a new person entering into state government relatively, I've been getting quite a crash course in the policy and budgetary process. And often government is said to be a very complex machine. And in my brief experiences with the governor's office, I began to think of all the actors and the people that really move the government. I look at them as gears that keep the machine running, so to speak. And conversations are happening year round internally with myself and my colleagues, with advocates doing the work on the ground, and with executive agencies to craft policy and to understand the issues that New Yorkers are experiencing. However, to give a rough timeline of the process, I think it's also helpful to know that state agencies, including the governor's office, are preparing their budgets and coming up with policy ideas as early as June and working on them through October of the previous year. And in the fall months, the executive chamber also works with the division of the budget, who are is the mastermind through crunching the numbers, and is a really awesome department of people who are diligent with balancing the competing fiscal priorities for the year. And by November and through the holidays, once all of the culmination of ideas and suggestions and recommendations from all of our partners are taken into consideration and really put into a package, they are presented to the governor, and she makes the final policy and budgetary decisions based on what the priorities are and the direction she wants to see the state move in the next fiscal year. And of course, she announces these priorities at her State of the State address, which is held in January, and is followed by the presentation of the executive budget announcement, which is presented to the legislature short after the State of the State announcement. And I did want to point out on my slide, I did not make an error. I do see that advocates is at the top and advocates are at the bottom, just like a sandwich. And I think that it's really important to emphasize that we are intentional in making efforts and creating efforts of constant contact and communication with groups and organizations who really help move and empower and really hold the legislative and budgetary process accountable. Advocates like you, folks that work in state government, and just really overemphasizing. Advocates really do make a difference, and advocacy within state government does make a huge difference. And I just wanted to offer a quick disclosure before I begin with my formal presentation and going into the environmental justice pillar. I do want to emphasize that there are 204 policy proposals that were put forth by Governor Hochul. And while all 204 proposals are significant, important, and deeply touch the lives of all New Yorkers, especially those who are women, I will not be reviewing every single one. Otherwise, we will be here past lunch, and I personally need to eat lunch still. But there are also going to be some points highlighted throughout the presentation that I will cover in depth or give a bit more commentary on. And watching the time, I may skip over them, and I'm happy to follow up or answer anything during the Q&A session or post the presentation as well. And before I even get into this year's Save the State proposals, I did want to share that over the past year, the Hochul administration has successfully delivered clean power to parts of Long Island. Although I know this is mostly probably a New York City crowd, I think it is important to really understand the full landscape of what's definitely happening in the state. We've also announced the first round of available Bond Act funds, which includes $200 million for water infrastructure, and this is statewide. We've also launched the $200 million Empower Home Retrofits program to reduce energy costs for low-income homes, and have secured a $200 million in relief for high electric bills for 800,000 households. And I share this fact because in recognizing the urgency of climate change, Governor Hochul is definitely committed to continuing to take action and to make investment and reforms that are important for our climate and environmental goals as a state. And in navigating New York towards a greener future and taking steps to combat the climate crisis we're experiencing, Governor Hochul has made affordability a foundational part of her energy and sustainability agenda. And in 2024, we are hoping to launch the statewide Solar for All initiative, which combines the Energy Affordability Program and the Community Solar to deliver clean energy savings on utility bills. And of course, if you own a home, you rent, whatever the case is, you're probably paying a utility bill, and sometimes they get overwhelming and they get costly. And we are hoping to offer remedies for the costliness of electricity. Additionally, the administration plans to make a $500 million investment in clean water over the next 2 years, which builds on the already vested $4.2 billion for clean water, clean air, and the Green Job Environmental Bond Act. This also includes the water funding that is focused on equity and environmental justice. Excuse me. Governor Hochul's plan also seeks to launch new initiatives that protect water quality, in which she will continue to support essential water projects, which deliver support to rural communities and support efforts to protect our lakes and our drinking water. And lastly, the administration wants to make New York greener by investing $47 million towards planting 25 million trees within the next 10 years and work to launch the Clean Transportation Standard Study, which will target greenhouse gases created by transportations and modes of transportation that have a negative impact on our air quality, our health, and our well-being. And kind of just to summarize all of what I said, as a planetary phenomenon, climate change has been studied and has shown to impact women more deeply than it does men. And not only from the biological perspective, but as I stated before, from the economical, from the health and the mental health perspective. And it's also really significant to keep in mind that this is not only a state issue, it's a national issue, and it's also a global issue. So understanding that it's not just us, New York doesn't exist in a vacuum, but the efforts that we take statewide, hopefully will have a trickle effect into the greater population, the greater scape of the world. So I say that hopefully. Next is the health pillar. Healthcare and the health industry is a very huge topic. And again, I stated I will not cover it all, but I will try to touch on points that are reflected within my portfolio and that the governor has really made great efforts in really trying to invest in and really cultivate. And with more than $300 billion in spending, New York's healthcare system is one of the largest and complex systems in the nation. And over the last 2 years, Governor Hochul has made multi-billion-dollar investments in investing in safety net hospitals. She passed the largest Medicaid rate increases in more than a decade, and announced a $2.6 billion investment in capital transformation funding for the state's healthcare facilities. And it's not lost on us either that there is still much work to be done. And we recognize that healthcare delivery within the state is also a really great challenge. And we're making efforts to increase resiliency in our healthcare system through things such as modernizing emergency room services. And of course, one of the largest things is strengthening the healthcare workforce and making sure that people feel comfortable entering to the workforce and people that are in the workforce feel like they're being supported within the work that they're doing to keep all New Yorkers safe, alive, and healthy all the time. And in all of the important areas of health, the administration has been making substantial efforts to improve our mental health care systems. And while mental health access has always been an issue in many respects, the pandemic in its own way really highlighted and exacerbated some of the issues that were already existing in communities and impacting people across the state. And the Hochul administration has made big strides to addressing the mental health crisis that is disproportionately compounded and again exacerbated for historically disadvantaged community. And there have been efforts to definitely invest in youth mental health in addition to health for all New Yorkers. And I'm just staying on time. And in the interest of time, I wanted to just speak to a few of the highlighted sections and state that New York currently ranks 30th in the nation's well-being and ranks pretty poorly in prevention and treatment services, mostly for children overall, but children especially. We plan to take several steps to expand high quality access for New York's children and youth. And one way we want to do this is ensuring that the Medicaid and Children's Health Coverage Insurance Program covers eligible children between ages 0 and 6. And we are also making efforts to support community-based organizations that are also making investments in the quality of life for children with special needs. And again, healthcare is broad, healthcare is big, it's a completely different place of its own. And this does not even scratch the surface. This is not an extensive list. Again, there are 204 proposals, and a lot of them have to do with healthcare. But there are definitely good intentions and strong efforts that the governor envisions for the state of health for our youth and also for all New Yorkers. And I just wanted to also mention that New York has made really great strides in eliminating preventable epidemics and chronic diseases. And we want to continue this work and make it easy for access to care, treatment, and preventable services. And I would be remiss in not speaking about abortion care. And since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the governor continues to find ways to make New York a safe harbor for those who provide and seek abortion care. And as part of last year's budget, there were major actions to protect abortion access, including Medicaid, increased Medicaid reimbursement, additional data protections for patients who were seeking care, and $100.7 million investment in funding to support abortion providers and reproductive health care. Governor Hochul also signed legislation that allowed pharmacists to provide over-the-counter contraception and to ensure that SUNY and CUNY campuses have access to medication abortion. And still and yet, with all of the amazing progress and initiatives we were able to instill to affirm and expand access to abortion care, there are still concerns from the physician side about medical data and data privacy, and we're making efforts to modernize the technology for electronic reporting to provide safeguards for sensitive abortion-related information. And next, the safety pillar. I also wanted to just preface this, that public safety through the lens of the Women's Affairs portfolio primarily focuses on domestic violence and gender-based violence. And that sometimes will cross with firearms, any violence with firearms or guns, just because of the nature of the situations that happen with gun violence and domestic violence as well. And it has been expressed that many domestic violence offenders have never been prosecuted, and dismissal rates remain high across the state, but mostly in New York City. Offenders' behavior, if not prosecuted in a sufficient amount of time, the behavior continues and it has the potential to escalate. And our data shows that domestic violence actually accounts for 40% of felony assaults in New York City and 30% of aggravated assaults outside of New York City. And additionally, domestic homicides account for roughly 20% of homicides in any given year in New York State. And police departments also respond to about 1,100 incidents of domestic violence or gender-based violence calls in a day. So these numbers are staggering and they're quite shocking, especially coming into this work with domestic violence and domestic violence providers, and understanding that the resources are needed and there's constant need for safety and safety net programs for survivors as well. And with this data, again, the governor proposes to make bold investments in a set of proven strategies to increase the likelihood of successfully prosecuting domestic violence cases, seizing firearms, and deterring future violence among high-risk offenders, and to help survivors recover and regain financial, mental, and economic stability. Governor Hochul is proposing a $40.8 million funding to preventing and prosecuting domestic violence cases, which includes $3.8 million in support of the domestic violence STAT model, which seeks to identify and enhance prosecution of high-risk domestic violence cases, especially given that 50% of abusers flee the scene before police arrive and they are adequately apprehended. This $38.8 million also includes $5 million investment in grant programs for survivors which will be used to cover expenses in emergency situations. And I'm also very happy to share that Governor Hochul announced last month and within the budget, a $120 million investment in victim service providers and advocates with victim assistance funding. Victim service organizations provide substantial important support and financial assistance to survivors during their time of need, which includes shelter, food, safety, and security measures. And this funding is significant because there have been federal cuts to VOCA funding or Victims of Crime Act funding, which would have been a major disservice to victim service providers who are doing such important work and caring for the survivors within the state. And I do want to give an honorable mention to the New York State Swims Initiative, which proposes a $150 million investment in supporting equitable and widespread access to safe swimming opportunities across the state. The New York Swims Initiative includes a $60 million efforts to build swimming pools in underserved communities, in addition to a $60 million investment in installing floating pools in natural waterways. And I wanted to stay conscious of the chat, so sorry if I haven't gotten to you yet. The next is the economic pillar. The economic justice pillar from where I sit has to do with labor and workforce protection and just general workforce and labor initiatives. One of the most exciting initiatives I have been able to work on has been the expansion and the increase of medical and disability paid leave. And currently, the maximum paid benefit available to New Yorkers who need time off to care for themselves. This also includes anyone with a pregnancy-related condition. The cap has been set at $170 per week since 1989. We're in 2024. That's over 30 years ago. And of course, the lack of substantial medical leave many times forces New Yorkers to make the hard choice between caring for themselves and caring for their own health needs and putting food on the table. And that should not be so. This also deeply impacts women, especially because 70% of medical leave claims are made by women, and 36% of those claims are related to pregnancy, including recovery from childbirth, which is also very important. Additionally, people with disabilities are disproportionately low income as well, with nearly half of the families with a member that have a disability whom are living or near poverty. So after about 30 years and a lot of effort on behalf of a lot of advocacy groups, Governor Hochul has taken this year to propose an increase to the maximum weekly benefit, which will be tied to the state average weekly wage. Additionally, medical and disability leave will match New York State's paid family leave benefit for the first 12 weeks of medical leave, which will allow employees to receive 67% of their average weekly wage. And this increase is proposed to be phased out over 5 years. And additionally, as the first woman, mother, and grandmother Governor Hochul continues to make her commitment to childcare. New York has taken great efforts to expand access and affordability for families by investing over $7 billion over 5 years. And the fiscal year 2025 budget only continues to build on these efforts to providing grants for sustainable childcare programs, establishing and continuing piloting the family care networks, and reimbursing childcare providers for quality improvement efforts. Reproductive justice. Almost to the end. But I thought that having a slide on the statistics and the data in regard to maternal and infant health in the state was very significant. New York still ranks 15th out of 37 reporting states nationwide on maternal mortality and morbidity, and a woman's chance of dying as a result of pregnancy is more than twice as high in New York as it is in California, which has the lowest maternal mortality rate in the nation. Pregnancy pregnancy related deaths are also sky high, too high for Black mothers and women of color, accounting for 14.3% of all births, but account for more than half of maternal deaths that happen across the state. Black mothers are 3 and 5 times more likely to die from pregnancy than white mothers, and are also more likely to experience pregnancy-related complications. And within the past 2 years, infant mortality has slightly gone up, and nationally, it has increased for the first time in over 20 years. And just to still highlight the disparities within infant and maternal and infant health, Black infants are almost 3 times higher to die than white infants too. So there is a real effort and a real attention being put on maternal mortality morbidity in the state. And the governor proposes to advance a comprehensive plan to further increase access to quality care during the pre and postpartum period, including mental health care and addressing other risks associated with infant and maternal mortality. And some of those really awesome initiatives are increasing access to prenatal health care. There was a very amazing idea put forward by the governor in establishing the first in the nation state prenatal paid leave, which currently is being proposed to be added to paid family leave. This would allow for mothers and birthing people to have 40 additional hours of paid leave through PFL to go to prenatal care appointments. A lot of times there is a choice of, do I go to this appointment or do I go to work? And in knowing that you may or may not get paid still also shouldn't be an option. We want healthy moms, we want healthy babies in the state. And this is one way that we are trying to achieve that. Also, required informed consent to drug tests in pregnancy or postpartum has been a big issue, especially because Black women are also disproportionately tested without their consent, which again, the disparities exist all through maternal and infant health. And we are making efforts to really call those out and make intentional efforts to solve those. Additionally, increasing a standing order to increase access to doula services, increasing and establishing new oversight mechanisms to avoid unnecessary cesarean births. Also very important, again, because of maternal mortality and morbidity, there are disparities in who receives cesarean births within the hospital system in general. We also want to reduce the barrier to cost for pregnant patients, reduce the risk of sudden infant deaths, unexpected infant deaths, and continue to develop data-driven interventions to improve birth equity across the state as well. And improving maternal mental health is also very important. And we are making, again, very intentional and thought out efforts to really address some of the postpartum issues, and sometimes before pregnancy even happens, in regard to mental health needs, mental health concerns, and addressing mental health issues across the state, especially for women, especially because there are a lot of mental health, maternal health care deserts the more you go upstate, and these needs are only becoming more apparent every year. And lastly, requiring paid breaks for breast milk expression in the workplace. The legislation would require all breaks for breast milk expression to be about under 20 minutes, but there also wouldn't be a risk of losing any money, while also building a culture of inclusivity and acceptance of mothers and birthing people in the workplace as well. And just like that, I am all set, and definitely open for questions now. I think I gave a little bit less time than I needed, but I needed a little bit less time. So that only leaves a little bit more time for questions, which I'm happy to begin. Did I stop sharing my screen? Okay. I did just stop sharing my screen, but I am still here. I have a question. I would love to follow up and learn more about the education budget for our state. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. I would definitely love to follow up as well, as I am still learning and getting acclimated to the women's affairs portfolio. Of course, that intersects with education, higher education, grade school education, and I'd happy to know what your concerns are, and how I can be of assistance as well. Okay. I do also have a question, a long comment. We were thrilled to see the governor's executive budget fully fund the state's public financing program in its inaugural year. As you know, the policy has the promise to break barriers to political participation, especially for women and individuals from historically disadvantaged communities. We've seen it play a major part in making New York City's city council more representative, including help ushering in the first majority female council. What will your administration do to increase public awareness of the state's new program, especially as we inch closer to the deadline to sign up in later months? How can the Brienne Center and our partners help? That is from Marina. Thank you so much, Marina, for that question. Right now, I will transparently say that I'm still learning about the New York City political scene, and I would actually love your help to understand that a bit more, and to really, and I see, oh, somebody has their hand raised, and to get a sense of what that means. But in terms of breaking barriers to political participation, and I'm just reviewing your question. I'm sorry. In terms of what the administration can do to increase public awareness of the state's new program, I would definitely have to find that out. But again, I do extend myself as a resource. If I don't know the answer, I also have no issue asking around to get that answer and circling back and following up with you as well, if that is helpful. Okay. Okay, there's a question from an anonymous attendee. What is the process by which the governor's office chooses to create and or only keep the constituency affairs categories in slide 2? It's extremely disappointing to see that the Arab American and Muslim communities, as well as the Native American communities, are missing. This type of exclusion is precisely what has perpetrated the erasure of those marginalized communities and is painfully tone deaf. Well, to this person, I completely understand and hear what you're saying. I do not know if there is a propensity to only keep these constituency groups here. But I hear you, and I would love to follow up with you as well too, just so I can one, know who you are if you would like to be known, and see how we can make that expansion. Again, I'm fairly new to the office, so I'm happy to ask more questions and be more investigative during my tenure with the governor's office. But I do think you are correct in really pointing out that there are, again, parts, and I did say this, parts of the state that are not represented and should be.
Shakira, I have a question right here. I'm not sure if you're able to see it. It says, how is it determined how much funding will go to each priority or proposal?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was like looking through the Q&A and I know there's a little bit of dead space there. I was just reading some of the comments and the questions. But how determined how funding will go to each priority proposal? That's a really good question. So again, with all the conversations that we have starting in the summer, up until October, and through December, we are having conversations with the division of the budget, which is again the fiscal arm of the state, and helps the executive chamber talk through and understand how the monies get moved around. I am not a huge finance person, so the exact how I think gets negotiated internally. And with that, there are conversations that are had and very hard policy and fiscal decisions that get made. But the Department of the Budget team does work really hard to accommodate all of the competing priorities for the entire state. And I'm not sure if that answers the question, but within what I've been able to see and observe and really learn, that's the biggest observation I've had so far.
Thanks, Shakira. Another question I see on my end is, what is the role of advocacy, or what's the impact of advocacy on shaping the governor's priorities through the state of the state process?
Oh gosh, it's the role of advocacy is huge, and the impact of advocacy in shaping the governor's priorities is also huge. And one example that I can share is paid family leave. Paid family leave was a huge win for the state. And that was really on the part of advocates pushing for paid family leave and all of the benefits that come with it. And you look at the medical and disability paid leave initiative that I was talking about. Again, that is an initiative that's been pushed by advocates for years at this point, and probably even decades, just because it's taken so long for the benefit to increase or get attention, so that we can start even working and have a conversation to increase it. Folks come and they lobby and they tell me and tell legislators and folks about the issues that they're having, and we are able to listen and take those in and figure out strategic ways internally how we can introduce them and enhance them in ways that are inclusive and mutually beneficial, but also service the most people across the state as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that answer, Shakira. And another question I see here is, what are the pain points of the budget, and what can advocates or WCC community do to advocate for the issues important to women to make sure that it's on the governor's agenda?
I think the pain points with the budget is that there's never enough money. I think that advocates can can always again have their voices heard, and let us, if there's a dollar amount that you foresee, that you envision, letting us know that, so that we can be cycles of information to say, this is what we potentially can do, this is, well, one, this is what the advocates need, and this is what they're asking for. And then once the budget and state of the state is announced, saying, well, this is what we can actually do, and hoping that in that there is an opportunity to still get people what they need, even with the dire fiscal concerns that are happening at the federal level, and that trickle down to the state level. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And another question I see over here is, if every issue is a woman's issue, mm-hmm. but the term is still thought of in terms of specific issues such as childcare, how is gender equity, quote unquote, considered for issues that don't fall under narrow traditional frameworks?
That's a really good question. I think that gender equity, again, has to do with the consciousness and the advocacy and the effort around everybody as a unit to really ensure that when we are talking about childcare, that these things are also not just for or about women in childcare. I think the other part of it is we typically label things women's issues because of who we see performing or providing services or teaching or taking care of people. And many more times than none, educators and education is very women. Educators are mostly women. Healthcare professionals are mostly women. And caregivers are mostly women. So understanding that there does have to be a shift in how we're thinking about what is women dominated versus what is male dominated, and making very conscious efforts to address policy issues and address any social needs as something that if we are doing it for one type of gender, then we're doing a disservice to all people. And I think even the tweaking of language and legislation makes a very big difference. I do remember years ago reading legislation and seeing pronouns in there, seeing he, seeing she, especially when you're looking at any policy related to pregnancy. Now all of that language has been gender neutralized, and there's no gender specific language. So I think those are some of the instances and where we can look at issues and make small changes at a cultural and a fundamental level to ensure that all of the work does not fall on women, and that it's seen through policy and through conversation and through the advocacy that everybody does, that it's things that are tagged women's issues should not only be women advocating for them or women caring about them or women speaking to them, but they're a universal effort on behalf of everybody.
Absolutely. And we have time for one more question, which is a little bit more of a broader one. NYC is on the verge of budget cuts. How can the state support and cover these cuts to the city?
Say that question again.
NYC is on the verge of budget cuts. How can the state support and cover these cuts to the city?
That is also a really good question. And currently, again, in full transparency, a bit beyond the scope of where what I've been able to absorb. I do know the budget cuts are here, and I think that having at least one suggestion is New York City programs, New York City service providers having having constant conversations with me, and I will share my my contact information again. Um, but yeah, as I'm learning what's happening across the state, and I know that budget cuts are happening universally across the state, and New York City in particular is experiencing these cuts. But I want to actually learn from you all what we can do, and how we can support you, and what what um are what are some intentional opportunities that I can let you all know about, and how we can be collective partners. Although there are folks that are also work within the executive chamber in New York City. I do understand as the point of contact for women's affairs that I will be asked those questions, but I'm also willing to learn and to help the best way that I can as well. I hope that that's helpful. I'm sorry.
No apology, Shakira. Thank you so much. You have provided a really insightful presentation that makes it very clear the Hochul's administration's plans to really improve the quality of life for women in quite a few different ways. And it's really important for us as New Yorkers to know what those specific policy and budget proposals are, and especially how they impact us, our families, as well as our communities. So thank you again for this presentation, and for sharing your contact information, which we will also share again. And just as a reminder to the folks in the audience, if you didn't have a chance to have your question answered, Shakira will certainly follow up with you. And so again, Shakira, thank you for this presentation, and thank you to the audience members for your questions. Next up is Laura Edidin, Senior VP of Programs and Partnerships, who will walk us through a newly created online resource tool called the Civic Hub. Laura?
Thank you, Nayela. I hope today has inspired everyone to be more active in your communities. And with that in mind, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to a new online tool developed by Women Creating Change called the Civic Matters Hub, which is really one-stop shopping for all the information you need to affect change in your community. And the thing that I really appreciate about the hub is that it meets you wherever you are. So if you're somebody who is already very active in her community and you want to deepen that engagement or meet others who are in that space, or you're someone who's newly inspired to try and affect change in your community, the hub has everything you need. So I'm going to do a quick demo for you. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And for example, if you're just starting thinking about how you can be more involved in your community, I suggest coming to our homepage, which you can see here, and scrolling down to this really fun interactive quiz. It literally takes 30 seconds to complete, and it'll help you identify actions that you can take based on your personality on the issues that matter most to you. I took it, and it really gave me some insight into myself and was really fun, quick, and easy to do. Now, let's say you want to start with the basics. Who are you elected officials? How do bills become laws? We learned today about the state budget, but let's say you're more interested in how the city budget process works. Well, you can go to the second tab at the top of the page, marked Learn, and you'll find easily digestible guides here that can give you information on all of those subjects and more. You can see as I scroll down here, you can just quickly click on them, and there's all kinds of information available here. Now, maybe you've already identified an issue that's important to you, and you want to learn more about how to make change in that space and have your voice heard. In that case, I would suggest going to the Learn tab and clicking on our resource library. If you scroll down here, there's a search box, and you can enter the subject of something you're passionate about. So I'm going to put in reproductive rights. I'll search. And when I scroll down, as you can see here, it pulls up resources for me that I can click through to learn more about how I can act to protect reproductive rights. Now, another place on the hub to find ways to drive change is under the Take Action tab here at the top. So for example, this is where you can learn about how to register to vote or when your elections are coming up. The hub also has an events calendar where you can learn about workshops and events that WCC is hosting, events that our partners may be offering, and events offered by the government. You can see that right here. And as you can see, today's webinar is featured on the calendar. And finally, you can access services on how to take care of yourself, your family, your friends, and your community by clicking on the Find Support tab here at the top. And as you scroll down, you'll see that there are sections here where you can click through and find out everything from mutual aid to self-care. In short, I encourage you to visit the hub, spend a few minutes exploring what we offer there. We'll drop a link to the hub in the chat. It takes less than a minute to register. I literally timed it when I registered myself, and it's absolutely free. I hope it becomes a resource that you'll go to often. Back to you, Nayela.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Shakira, again, for your insightful presentations. Shakira, your presentation, again, just really highlighted the issues that the state is working on to improve the quality of life for women. And Laura, your presentation, again, offered insight into how women across the city and state can get involved in issues that impact us and our families. And it is this engagement that builds our collective power as women and essentially changes the material conditions that govern our lives. And so I want you to think of this briefing as the beginning of a conversation. And please know that a follow-up email will be sent tomorrow, including Shakira's presentation, a link to WCC's hub, and more information on different ways that you can get involved in advocacy. So thank you again for taking the time to be here and for your shared commitment to empowering women through research, programming, and policy, specifically through a gendered lens. We look forward to working with you to build the collective power of women. Thank you again, stay safe, and be well. Bye, everybody.